The Distinguished Service Award is the highest honor awarded by the Section of Taxation. At your seats, you have a little summary of the background and the deserving nominee for the award who we'll recognize momentarily. The award is designed to recognize someone who's had a distinguished career in taxation and who's provided an aspirational standard for all tax lawyers to emulate. It's my honor and pleasure to recognize our 2023 Distinguished Service Award recipient, Pamela F. Olson. Hold just a minute. I will not try to detail all of her accomplishments and background, which are in the summary, but I'd like to say a few things and a few comments. Pam was born and raised in Minnesota and got her BA, magna cum laude, MBA, and JD at the University of Minnesota. She started her tax career in 1981 as a trial lawyer with the San Diego District Counsel's Office of the Internal Revenue Service. She moved from San Diego to Washington, D.C. to become an attorney advisor in the IRS Legislation and Regulations Division, and then she was special assistant to then IRS Chief Counsel Fred Goldberg. In 1986, Pam joined the Washington office of Skadden Arps, Slate, Meagher and Flom and was promoted to partner in 1990. At Skadden, she became very involved with the Section of Taxation. Among other things, in moving through the leadership, she was vice chair of committee operations and then chair of the section in 2000. She was the first woman to ever serve as chair of the Section of Taxation. During her term as chair, she was selected by the George W. Bush administration to be Deputy Assistant Secretary for Tax Policy, where she led the administration's efforts to enact the 2001 Economic Growth and Tax Relief Reconciliation Act. In September 2002, she was confirmed as Assistant Secretary for Tax Policy, again, the first woman to serve in that position, and led the administration's efforts to enact the Jobs and Growth Tax Relief Reconciliation Act, which, as you recall, included measures to relieve the double tax on corporate earnings and dividend distributions. As noted in the handout, Pam, and this is a quote, is noteworthy for her interpersonal skills and ability to manage a multiplicity of relationships to find mutually agreeable solutions to challenging problems. Pam is exceptional in her ability to remain focused and calm, absorbing stress without conveying it to those around her, including those who work under her. Pam's thoughtful judgment is sought after and respected by all. Pam left government service in 2004 and returned to Skadden, where she was head of the Washington, D.C. tax practice until 2011. She then joined PricewaterhouseCoopers, PwC, as a partner, as deputy tax leader and Washington National Tax Services leader until she retired from the partnership in 2020. She had then continued as a senior tax policy advisor at PwC, where she finds many clients continuing to draw upon her experience and expertise. Pam's distinguished service to the profession has drawn many recognitions, several of which are mentioned in the handout, and it's our pleasure to present her with our highest recognition of lifetime achievements and contributions to the profession, our Distinguished Service Award. Pam, if you will step up to the podium, I'd like to present this to you. And please share some remarks.
Well, I think I was trying to cut that short because I never like to have people talk about me. Anyway, thank you, Wells, and thank you, Eric Solomon, for doing that write-up. One of the things I learned from Eric after I left Treasury was the extent to which I had absorbed the pressures of the office without passing it on. I don't think I quite realized it while I was there, but at any rate, it's one of the highest compliments I've ever received, so I thank you for that, Eric. I also want to thank the tax section for this incredible honor. It's a little overwhelming to stand up here. I have 9-year-old twin grandchildren. When they heard I was getting an award, they assumed the award was for baking cookies. And they were really quite disappointed to learn that it was not the case. So my opportunity today is making brief remarks. Nothing like having the commissioner speak after you to fill the room and make you feel like, oh, you came to, no, I know better. You came to hear the commissioner. So brief remarks, I'd like to use a couple of tricks I learned from my congressional friends to lengthen them without lengthening them. First, I'd like to associate myself with the remarks of last year's award winner, Karen Hawkins, whose speech lit up this room a year ago. I don't know if Karen's here. I haven't seen her. But if she is, thank you, Karen. And for those of you who were here, I'm sure you remember them. Second, Wells, I might request the opportunity to revise and extend my remarks later. So I'm from Minnesota, as the bio says, where we have a saying, we're humble people with much to be humble about. So that naturally leads me to the question, what am I doing here? I was on the Tax Section Council when the decision was made to begin giving a Distinguished Service Award. And the first award went to Jack Nolan, who, for many of us, was the dean of the tax bar. I had the great fortune of working with Jack on ABA projects. Jack epitomized service. He served his clients. He served the tax system. He served the profession. He was a gracious mentor to me and many young lawyers. The Nolan Fellowship honors his legacy. I've had the great fortune of serving with many of the individuals who received the Distinguished Service Award in prior years. And the reason I'm here is because of what I learned from them and from many other friends, colleagues, and mentors over the years. I've got a small reunion going on up here at the first couple of tables. My family has all moved west, which is why I have as well. I decided what I'd really like to do is surround myself with the people that I've surrounded myself with my career. And so a lot of people that I worked in particular in the government with are here, and I'm delighted to have them here. I'm going to talk about them in a bit. But I also learned a lot from my husband, a trade lawyer with a passing interest in tax. While in government, he served on a task force on worldwide combined unitary taxation, proving that ideas never actually die. This is one that's back, making the news today. And replacing the FISC rules with the extraterritorial income exclusion. I'm looking at Barbara Angus and Mark Prater and Janice Mays. They all remember all these things. That was following the U.S.'s loss at the WTO. Which was to be followed by another loss because the extraterritorial income exclusion didn't pass muster either. Anyway, our neighbors often joked about how boring our dinner table conversations must be. Trade clearly won out as the more interesting topic over tax. Our son's first email handle was Free Trade 101. Nothing about tax in there. Now, if you happen to know my husband, Grant, you've probably heard some of his jokes at tax lawyers' expense. He once filled in for Mark Prater at an ABA tax section plenary session because Mark was stuck on the Hill and couldn't make the trip. And Grant was at the time also working on the Senate Finance Committee with Mark. And he got up and described tax lawyers as speed bumps on the global trade superhighway. Anyway, among his other jokes, we confused tax with another 3-letter word ending in X. He says tax lawyers lack a sense of humor. I tell him his jokes just aren't funny. Speaking of which, one of the highlights of my career was writing Marty Ginsburg's Distinguished Service Award bio. Marty's remarks, after suggesting the award committee must have been drinking when they decided to give it to him, were the story he told here in this very lunch for the first time of giving RBG the advance sheets that led to the landmark equal protection decision and later the movie on the basis of sex. Although Marty made light of his contributions, many of us benefited from Marty's willingness to share his knowledge and experience. Eric and Barbara will both remember the hours Marty spent thinking through issues and options when we were at Treasury working out the details of the 2003 dividend exclusion proposal. But returning to the topic of service and mentorship, as I look back on my career, what stands out is how much I owe to my government service and to my ABA service. So I want to recognize some of those friends that I mentioned from my time in the government who are here and whose friendship and mentorship have meant so much to me. First, Fred Goldberg, the only person to hold the tax hat trick. IRS Chief Counsel, Commissioner, and Assistant Secretary. Fred's willingness to give me responsibility, trust my judgment, that was really questionable, Fred, and introduce me to members of the bar at the ABA tax section meeting, first one I attended in January of 1985. That enriched my career immeasurably. I learned much from two other legends of the tax bar early in my career, B. John Williams and Ken Gideon. Ken is, of course, no longer with us, and B. John couldn't be here today, but I'm grateful to both of them for their friendship and constructive criticism throughout my career. Nina Olson. Nina, my adopted identical twin sister. Nina and I were both in the government at the same time. She began as the National Taxpayer Advocate shortly after I joined Treasury, and every once in a while I'd pick up a tax notes piece and see Olson says, and I thought, what? I didn't say that. And I looked, oh, okay, the other, my adopted identical twin sister. So Nina, who spent 18 years, that's close to a life sentence, as the IRS National Taxpayer Advocate. Emily Parker once said that if the tax system were a dog, the National Taxpayer Advocate would be the fire hydrant. Anyway, Nina worked with me tirelessly while I was at Treasury on improving the filing system for low-income taxpayers, and I'm very grateful for that. Kevin Brown. Kevin, who's no drama practicality in administering the tax law and solving problems I benefited from during my time at Treasury and who has mentored so many others. Thank you, Kevin. Brian Meehan, who served on the Joint Committee on Taxation while I was at Treasury and whose good judgment and experience I've relied on for many years. Two longtime friends from the Hill, Mark Prater and Janice Mays, whose ability to work on a bipartisan basis inspires and provides hope for the future. Thank you both. There are some individuals who may be in the category of mentees, but one of the things I've come to understand is how much can be learned from those you mentor, and that the best of the mentees will far exceed your ability as a mentor. Gary Wilcox. There's a credit card that's, the logo is don't leave home without it. Well, for years I called Gary that card. Carrie Pugh, Jessica Huff, Itai Grinberg, Armando Gomez, Sindhu Bloom. I have to share the best advice I ever got from a mentee, and this is an exact quote. Pam, you're being too logical. You should stop. It's holding you back. Other advice, always bring beer. And a piece of advice I just received a few minutes ago. I've found a couple of shots of tequila before getting up to speak helps a lot. And then there's the measurement of the increase in email response rate if the subject line is free beer. Finally, there are 3 members of my Treasury team that I especially want to thank. Eric Solomon, who's a prior award recipient, and all of you know, was the most reliable colleague and friend one could find. Barbara Angus, my international tax counsel, globe-trotted, successfully negotiating tax information exchange agreements with tax havens who decided it was time to abandon bank secrecy. She once had to take me to Switzerland with her to help out, but otherwise she did it all on her own with her capable team. Finally, Drew Lyon. Drew is an economist, not a lawyer, but he's sitting here today anyway. One of the things I realized working with Drew is how much we lawyers operate on the basis of visceral reaction when what we need is cool-headed, thoughtful analysis. In my view, Drew is the finest public finance economist in the country. Unfortunately, he's retiring at the end of June, but I was so fortunate to have had the opportunity to serve with him at the Treasury Department and for the last dozen years. One more recognition, in addition to the support that we all get from our families, there's also the support staff that take care of us all the time. Thank you, Gisette, for being my right hand. We stand on the shoulders of giants, and I've had the privilege of standing on the shoulders of some of the tallest. So now it's time for me to wrap up this part of the program so that it can be turned over to the real reason you're here, to hear from Commissioner Werfel. I want to say that I'm very grateful to Commissioner Werfel for accepting the call to service. He's taken on the responsibility at a very challenging time. The words driving the agenda from both political sides are harsh and angry. Misapplied enforcement and targeting are not the words of Fred Goldberg's kinder, gentler IRS. I recall sitting next to the spouse of a DOJ official at a tax section dinner many years ago. He was a criminal lawyer, and he didn't understand what it was with the tax bar that we'd put so much effort into being helpful to the IRS. I believe the tax section has long been the pillar of the tax system, not the architect of its demise. I trust the section will continue to be that, supporting the essential IRS tasks of collecting the revenue and administering the many social programs that have been entrusted to it. Thank you very much.